A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 126th episode of the Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. More than a year back in April 2020, when the pandemic had just started and schools had shut down, online education was quickly coming to the fore. And we at Notebook felt that it was our privilege and our responsibility to put together a platform where educators could discuss the various issues that they were facing. Well, over the last 1 year and more, we have had the opportunity to discuss a myriad range of topics, ranging from the curricular to the extracurricular, talking about sports, holistic development, mental health, and a whole lot more. One of the things that has emerged through all of this is that things often have more sides than one. The topic that we are dealing with today is one such topic: ability grouping, something that educators have already done for ages, quite intuitively. But today we are looking at the advantages and disadvantages of ability grouping from the point of view of designing any progress. When you know the variables that you're working with, it obviously helps in designing the process. Whereas at the same time, it goes counter to the visions of inclusion having more homogeneous setup. Or does it? To discuss this topic first, our first speaker today is Mr. Philip Burrett. Mr. Burrett retired from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. He served the Doon School in various senior capacities before retiring. Mr. Burrett obviously has been the opening speaker in most of our forums here. He also, while with Doon School in the year 2011, he carried out a visioning exercise. He's also a qualified leadership trainer from Wellington College, UK. He's an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist. And we at Notebook are privileged to have him as our senior advisor. Sir, over to you.
Thank you very much, Bayu, for that introduction. And a very good evening to you and the entire Notebook team of Achin, Abhishek, Gagori, Meghna, and all the others in Calcutta. An interesting topic. If one looks at students in a classroom, each of them has arrived there after passing an admission test or passed any exam that has enabled them to get to that class. So we assume that they're all equal, have their equal abilities, but are they really equal? Ask any teacher and check their grades in respective subjects, and you'll find that in any class, your range will be from some people in the 90s and some people will fail. So how can we say they're all equal? I don't think all students are equal. Even though as teachers we treat children as equal, we know that they have unequal abilities. To begin with, students have different aptitudes, different interests, different styles of learning, and they learn differently. We group them for convenience sake. It is convenient and economically viable to put a lot of students in one class with a teacher there, as long as they are similar. You can't put an 18-year-old with a 5-year-old. But in some schools in Oman, that happens when they're teaching English. You might have a 3-year-old with the same ability as an 18-year-old. But now, if the same class goes for a sports lesson, will they be equally competent when it comes to gymnastics or football or badminton? Some may not make it to the team. Some may be better at choir and drama. Some will not make it past the auditions for the school drama and play. Others get rejected from the swimming team. So let's face it, no two kids are equal. Some of them are better at some things than others. Or as George Orwell put it, all men are equal, but some men are more equal than others. But if you have to ask me, do all children have some ability? Yes. Most kids have wonderful ability, but they don't have to be equally able in everything. Now, so while we can accept that our children do not have the same ability in sports, why is it so difficult for parents to understand that they may not be academically similar? Now, how do parents see their children? No parent wants to see their child as being weaker in academics or less able, and will fight school authorities when their kids are dropped from the playing 11 or is not made school captain or is not made a prefect or doesn't make it to the debating team. And they even shy away from the mention of having their children tested for, say, learning disability. It's a kind of taboo to have a child considered academically weak. Now, even as Shabayu mentioned earlier, the whole buzzword of inclusive education is going around, where you have children of different abilities learning from each other. I understand that, but it is not easy to put in practice. Now, schools rank students in examinations. In doing so, they are corroborating the idea of students being unequal. Having said that, boards have recently stopped ranking students, even though US college admission forms often ask where our students are ranked when they apply for admissions to the colleges. So the ranking is still in progress. Now, I must say that in the school I worked in, the Doon school, right from 1935, we had streaming. We had actually different grouping abilities. Now, ability grouping is the practice of placing students of similar academic ability in the same class group, as opposed to putting them all into one class. So let's say if you ever asked a Doon school boy what class he was in, he would not say, I'm in class 7. He would say, I'm in C214. Now, C would stand for class 7 in our lingo. 214. 2 would mean he's second stream for English, which means history and geography as well. First stream in Hindi, 1 is Hindi. He's a very good Hindi student. But in maths and sciences, he's 4. Therefore, in our school, we have a Dalton plan. A teacher has a classroom and the children move from class to class. So when it comes to English, he's in stream 2 with equal ability people. When it comes to Hindi, he moves to the highest stream, that's 1. And when it comes to maths and science, he moves to the weakest stream, that is 4. Now, the advantage of this system is that he was obviously in an equal ability group, but how was he selected for that stream? Teachers looked at the test scores in the previous year, and then they put him up to the dean of studies, and he got placed in the streams 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, the good thing was that your stream could change. You could be a student who was C444, which means you're the weakest stream in maths and science, Hindi and English. But by the time you get to class 11, you may be S122, means you have actually improved. There is the incentive to do better and get out of your stream. At the same time, I've also seen boys who started off with C444 and ended up with SC444 7 years later. Now, what is the advantage of streaming? Ask any teacher, and the problem of teaching mixed ability heterogeneous classes. And they will say it is difficult because some kids are so bright that they are left unchallenged while the teacher moves and tries to help the weaker students. There's often more indiscipline in these classes because the teacher's focus moves from the bright ones who are left unchallenged, as I said, to the weaker students. Or he might neglect the weaker students and focus on those who are keen to learn, who are the front benchers and the smart students. Again, indiscipline results. Also, students in similar ability groups are taught differently. We taught them differently. Often, the class size was much smaller in the stream 4, that is the weakest ability. They got the best and the most experienced teachers. The syllabus was moved along at a slower pace. There was more overlapping. They got less homework. They got more individual attention. So they were taught differently. The lesson planning was very different. In a higher stream section, let's say a 1, teacher moved faster. There was more challenging questions. At the end of the year, however, they all had to do the same exam. Now, in stream 1, there were brighter students. Teachers could challenge these bright students. There was more collaborative work. Now, as I said earlier, students didn't mind this, nor did parents ever complain about our streaming system. Because as I said, you could move from a lower stream to a higher stream. It gave you the incentive to work hard. The other thing was that, as I said, parents never complained. The disadvantage, of course, was that it led to a complex. If I was put into a stream that is 4, I was considered thick or not able. And I did not, some people don't see the advantage of being with students who learn in a different way. So there was this sort of stigma attached to being in a 4-stream. And so after 70 years of streaming, about 2005, the then headmaster removed streaming from school. And now we have heterogeneous classes. Whether it resulted in better results and marks, I don't know. Now, doesn't the world place us all in different ability groups? Some make it through the law entrance exam, others fail the civil services, some kids pass the NDA entrance, some get rejected from the under-19 state cricket trials. So the world in any case is always segregating us into different groups, able and not able. Now, when we place students on the starting line of a race, they start on the same line or on the stagger. One comes up first and somebody has to come up last. And very often we clap the loudest for the last finisher. So, there's always segregation. Now, of the 5 candidates who enter a job interview, only one gets the job. What does it mean? That the other 4 are not good enough, and we have to accept it. Why don't we all face up to this fact that students learn better when placed in similar ability groups? Now, what is the positive aspects of it again? Now, in smaller groups, as I said, they receive more individual attention than in a large class setting. Often, students are working on similar skill levels. Individual students feel less intimidated about participating in the classroom discussion and sharing their work. Teachers can target instructions to the need of a smaller group rather than attempting to meet a broader range of needs from all students in a full-size classroom. The negatives, of course, as I mentioned earlier, are that it tends to place students in a box, and some of them stay in that box. And if you look at the, there's a law in academics which says the law of the self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you consider a student weak, put him into stream 4, he will be weak. Now, time spent in groups is time spent away from a regular classroom. And that's why sometimes they tend to fall back even more. That's another disadvantage. Also, if all children in a group are performing at a lower level, there are no opportunities for students to learn the skills that brighter students have. So when parents, if parents are ever looking for a school which offers ability groupings, what parents need to ask themselves is, how will progress be measured in my son's or daughter's group? What benchmarks must be met before moving back into the regular normal group? They need to share with the teacher the progress that their children are making, and also to know whether their kid can be moved into a higher ability group if he shows progress. There needs to be this communication between the teacher and the special needs teacher especially, and the parents. Now, if at any point the parent feels that the child has been placed in a wrong group, then I think they need to address this with the principal. Now, it is very strange that some parents who refuse to have their child looked at for special needs, they will fight off the special education teacher. Yet, I have found as a teacher that during the last 6 months, they know that their kid is not able, and they go and get him tested for learning disabilities, and they come back with a certificate saying, yes, he has dysgraphia or dyslexia or autism, just in order to get that extra 15 minutes per hour for the exam. So in their heart of hearts, they know that their children would have benefited from a special ability group, but because of the taboo, they held out against that only to get extra time. So in a 2.5 hour paper, their child might even get 45 minutes extra writing. Now, if I look back on my days in school, I ask myself the questions, the answers are, I never always felt comfortable with the academic pressure. Why was the teacher asking the smarter guys all the questions? How did I feel when the teacher neglected me and went to the smart kid? Sometimes I wished that the teacher went slower and I was not following the lesson. Sometimes I wanted to ask a question, but I was afraid to because the others would laugh at me. These are all the questions that a weaker student might encounter, and he would have felt much more comfortable in a group where in a mid or lower ability level group. It is for these reasons that students are placed in groups according to their ability, and they feel more comfortable going at their own place, at their own pace, being taught by understanding teachers who prepare the lesson to suit their needs. I often wonder if very weak students in school make good teachers, because they know how to deal with students who are not very smart. In fact, there were some schools where a teacher in English was asked to teach maths, or where a teacher of physics was asked to teach Hindi. Because when you are teaching something that you don't know, you teach it in a different way. And I think, to sum up, there are plus and minuses. There are schools where there are ability group segregation, but by and large, the world is not willing to face that children are different, and so we don't have it. So with that, I must hand this over to Shubhayu. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that I have laid the foundation for the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for taking us so wonderfully through this entire process of ability grouping. What is particularly interesting is you have experienced perhaps both ends of the spectrum. Teaching with ability grouping, the advantages and the disadvantages, and then once it was removed from your school, and which really gives us a fantastic rounded view into this whole system. To take this discussion further, our next speaker is Achin Bhattacharyya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. Achin is a fellow of the ICAI and a member of CPA Australia and CPA Ireland. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shiva, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, loud and clear.
Once again, welcome all of you to today's session on a topic which is very interesting but equally controversial: ability grouping. Let me first explain why it is controversial. Some scholars and researchers have referred to it as the psychological prison from which children never escaped. Thus, the role of ability grouping in reproducing social class inequalities need to be understood. Now, each country has their own perspective on ability grouping. Now, let's quickly compare East and West. Let's first travel to the land of the rising sun. In Japan, for instance, what is important is balance. Everyone can do everything. Japanese think that this is the right way to go. Everyone being the same is good. They're very comfortable this way. So, in their schooling system, they never divide by ability. Japanese education emphasizes group education and not individual education. They want everyone to improve and thus promote group goals instead of individual goals. Many other countries also avoid ability grouping. However, one of the countries which strides forward or which has been pursuing this agenda is England. Encouraging extensive ability grouping practices at the youngest possible age, sometimes as young as 2, 3, 4-year-old children. It is only the rarest and bravest of teachers in England who have managed to resist the pressure to group by ability, thereby maintaining a vision of schooling that promotes equity and high attainment for all. So those teachers are actually swimming against a strong tide of public and political opinion, the consequences of which are very distressing and predictable. However, if you correlate this with the findings of the PISA survey, UK scores very low on PISA indicators of school equality. So as you are aware, PISA has various parameters, various indicators. So in terms of PISA indicators, in terms of school equality, UK doesn't fare well. So this is a serious issue that should be a major concern for any government for the matter. Now, with this background, let's try to understand today's topic a little better. Ability grouping is the practice of placing students of similar academic ability in the same class group as opposed to placement based on age or grade level. It can be implemented in regular as well as special education classes. The groups are typically small, maybe consisting of 10 or even less than 10 students. And students are usually assigned to groups based on a review of data, such as their grades, result, or based on standardized tests and performance in class. Once placed, students can be moved into higher level group if their skill level increases. Likewise, they can also move into lower skill level groups should the need for more intensive remedial instruction arise. The instruction and concepts taught in groups will vary depending on the curriculum being taught at the student's grade level, and teachers will usually begin groups at a level that students are comfortable with. The level of difficulty increases as students as a group demonstrate increasing proficiency in the subject matter being taught. Some individual instructions may also occur. Now, while teachers naturally will strive to ensure that students in remedial group receive the same content as their peers, ability group instructions may be delivered at a slower pace because that is the whole objective, to try and ensure that students are getting extra help wherever required. There may be fewer assignments to allow the group to focus on specific areas of need. In lower level groups, teachers will typically analyze individual student error and develop specific strategies to correct those errors. So naturally, it has a lot of positive effects as well, right? Students in smaller group, for instance, may receive more individual attention than they would receive in a large classroom setting. Second, when all students are working on similar skill level, individual students may feel less intimidated. I think Burrett referred to this wonderful example about participating in the discussion and sharing their work with others in the group. Third, teachers can target instruction to the needs of a smaller group rather than attempting to meet a broader range. Because if everyone is present in a classroom, full-size classroom, naturally it's very broad. Likewise, to take a balanced view, let's also look at the negative aspect. As we mentioned, that this is very controversial. First and foremost, it may actually place students on a track that they can never change. As we discussed initially, so they become a prisoner of their own thoughts. The time spent in groups at times is a time which is spent away from classroom, mainstream instruction. Third, if all children in the group, in a particular group, are performing at a lower level, there are no opportunities for students to learn from those at high skill level. So, because there's also this concept of entire peer-to-peer learning, which is becoming so important. It's such a contemporary topic. So that opportunity is lost up to a large extent, I say. Now, from ability grouping, let's discuss one more term which is related to this. Tracking in schools. Now, tracking is sometimes referred to as ability grouping, although technically these two are different things. Now, tracking, for instance, was once the standard of public education in US. But today, there is a great deal of controversy regarding its relevance. The fact of the matter is that some students learn more quickly than others, and some students need more individual attention, as we discussed. In order to accommodate the different needs of the students, many schools started to adopt a tracking system, separating students by academic ability into different groups. In the early years, tracking was a response to, because we also need to look at the historical perspective as to why this came in the first place. So in the early years, tracking was a response to the growing number of immigrant children coming into the US public school system, coming from all over the world. So the goal was to provide those children with an education that was catered to their limited understanding of the English language and their limited preparation as compared to native students. What ended up happening, however, was a form of internal segregation within the entire American public school system. Today, as we discussed, tracking in US schools is less strict in most cases, and it is often used just for certain subjects or grades. Many secondary schools use the concept of tracking to provide different levels of difficulty for certain courses, dividing students into, say, basic, honors, college preparation group, etc. Some schools use a variation on tracking called, again, what we were discussing earlier, little different from tracking, ability grouping, which is less formal and less permanent than tracking. Now, ability grouping, as we discussed, are formed with an individual classroom, and they never last longer than a year. They're also assigned by the teacher, not by the school system. Whereas when we discuss about something like tracking, is the entire school system which is involved. For example, during a maths lesson, the teacher might divide the students into ability groups based on those who need to review basic facts before addressing assignment, and those who are ready for a more challenging assignment. So similar to what Burrett said this morning. Now, we started with ability grouping, we discussed tracking. Now we'll discuss one more term, which is very closely related to this, flexible grouping. Now, flexible grouping is data-driven teaching practice. With this practice, we put students into temporary groups to work together for only as long as it is needed for them to develop an identified skill or to complete a learning activity. So look at the difference. Here we are targeting a particular identified skill or a particular learning activity. The other major difference is the groups can be heterogeneous or homogeneous. So when I say heterogeneous, made of varying skill levels. So very consciously, when these groups are made, very consciously, skill levels might be diverse. So it's not that all students whose skills are at a higher level or lower level are placed in similar groups. Not always. Consciously, it might be a crisscross to ensure that all groups are equally balanced. It may also be homogeneous, wherein made up of same skill level. Now the groups change often based on the learning objective and students' needs or interests. The size of the groups can vary from 2 or 3 students in small groups up to 6 in a larger group. Students work together often with the guidance of a teacher, only for the length of the time necessary for them to develop, as we discussed, either an identified skill or to complete a particular learning activity. That makes it different from static groups that don't change based on students' needs or acquisition of skills or knowledge. So the groups are very dynamic. Now, as we discussed, this is very data-driven, flexible grouping. You can use data you already have about students to group and regroup them to meet their evolving needs. Now, when again and again we say data-driven, it doesn't mean that it's any rocket science or very fancy data. It can be as simple as observing students' work during a lesson. something which esteemed educators are already doing. We are just putting a name to it. In doing so, you may see that some students would benefit from more practice in a small group before moving on. A key component of flexible grouping is that while all students are working towards the same learning goal, the work addresses students' varying learning needs. So the work is engaging and is important for all students, but the task or how they show what they have learned may look different for each group. Now, if you look at the benefits for students, when we discuss something like flexible grouping, most importantly, not being pigeonholed. Flexible grouping allows for regrouping for different content areas. I believe that's beneficial to students who learn and think differently because they may have challenges in some content areas and not in others. Second, feeling value. Students bring their own skills, talent, and life experiences to the group. In flexible groups, students see that everyone adds value to the learning community. Everyone adds their own unique perspective. Third, ownership of work, which is good preparation. So because today, if you look at higher education or you look at work, later point of time, while teams often rely, because we know that in real world, in corporates, for example, teams often rely on people with different skill sets to manage different tasks of a particular project. So this is a miniature version, but a wonderful preparation ground where students take ownership for their own part. Likewise, if you look at things from teachers' perspective as well, a lot of benefits for educators. First and foremost, building a team-oriented culture. Second, efficient opportunities for students to practice. Third, naturally, opportunity to collect data. Other important aspect is, I think, role of families. Burrett also discussed about this, which is so important. The parents may be more familiar with the idea of ability grouping than flexible grouping that I discussed at the end. If that's the case, they may be confused when the child comes home talking about moving from group to group. It's important for families to know that how students are doing academically and with whom they work well are being considered while allocating groups. The moment they are convinced about the entire process, I guess naturally the believability factor naturally goes up. So these are a few aspects that I wanted to discuss. I thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing. We have a wonderful panel here today, and I look forward to their perspective in this very important topic. Over to you, Sheejan.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Achin mentioned, we do have a fantastic panel lined up for you today. Before we go on to the panel discussion, a little bit about Notebook. We at Notebook are an EdTech organization. We create short videos tailored to the school curriculum. Now, these videos come in handy in two cases. One is when you as a teacher are conducting a class, you can use these videos as a visual introduction to the topics that you're going to teach. So let's say if you're teaching a topic on photosynthesis, the students can actually use these videos to watch the stomatal cells opening and closing. Well, months later, the students have access to the same videos on their home systems. Whether it's a laptop or a smartphone, they have access to these same videos that they can watch over and over again. And this will help them revise for any upcoming tests or exams. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a small snippet of one of the many Notebook videos so that you understand exactly what I'm talking about.
Three friends, Rajesh, Prakash, and Sudha, opens a grocery shop in their locality. To start their business, they would need to take a place on rent, buy furniture, electrical fittings, weighing scale, etc. They would need to buy the groceries, vegetables, etc., which they would be selling in the shop. They would need to hire people, pay their salaries, pay taxes, electric bills, etc. They find out a place on the ground floor is available for rent of rupees 35,000 per month. They need to stock up the groceries in shop, which would cost them rupees 2,50,000. They would also need about rupees 15,000 per month to hire 3 people who will work for them in the shop. They would need to pay rupees 2 lakhs for the furniture, fridge and other equipments. This comes to rupees 5 lakhs. All the 3 friends have rupees 1 lakh each, which they have saved and can be put in the business. Now they are short of rupees 2 lakhs. They go to the bank, which agree to give them a loan for rupees 2 lakhs.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was a small snippet of one of our courses for +2 Commerce. However, if you go onto our website and mobile apps, www.notebook.school, you would find more than 10,000 such videos at your disposal. Well, now, after telling you about Notebook, it is time for me to introduce the panel that we have with us today. We have with us Mrs. Nirmal Kaur, who is the ex-principal of Navyug School, Mandir Marg. She started her professional journey by joining Presentation Convent School in Delhi in the year 1986 as PGT Economics. With science as the background in the school, she did her BA Honours in Economics from Delhi University. She also did her post-graduation and B.Ed from the Delhi University. She had vast experience of teaching at various schools. She had joined Navyug School, Sarojini Nagar, New Delhi in the year 1991 as PGT Economics. She served the school nearly for 16 years, and many students under her achieved professional excellence in various fields. After that, she was posted at Navyug School, Peshwa Road, and then at Lodhi Road, New Delhi as head of the school. Her posting before retirement was at Navyug School, Mandir Marg. Ever since she was commissioned for this post, she has worked sincerely and uplifted the academic standards of the school. Under her guidance, primary school got its identity and tiny toddler started blooming. CBSE appointed her as observer for prestigious AIPMT at Lucknow for 10th and 12th board examinations. UPSC, CBSE, DSSB appointed her for conducting prestigious examinations in her school. Ma'am, thank you so much for sparing the time to be here with us today. We had invited Dr. Father Sheejan Thomas from the Chavara Public School in Dhule, Maharashtra. Unfortunately, due to some unforeseen circumstances, Sir could not join the panel today. However, this is where I stop my share, switch on my camera, so that we can have this wonderful discussion. Ma'am, a very good evening and welcome to our panel. Nirmal ma'am, are you there? Achin or Gagori, could you just let me know if I'm audible? I hope there is no connectivity.
You're
Thank
audible.
Yes,
Shubham.
sir, you're audible.
Thank you so much. Nirmal Kaur ma'am, if you're there, if you could please unmute yourself and switch on your camera. Nirmal ma'am. Gagori, could you please call ma'am and see if she's facing any technical difficulties?
Sure.
Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for this short delay, but I'm sure it'll be worth it. If you can just give us a couple of minutes, I'm sure we'll get Nirmal ma'am online very, very soon.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you now. If you could also switch on your camera, then the audience would be able to see you as well.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, we can see you, we can hear you. Thank you so much and a very good evening.
Very good evening to all of you. First of all, I would like to congrats Notebook team for taking always a very interesting topic, and this topic is also very interesting and eye-opener as well as worth discussion. And I will also like to thank all of you for giving me this opportunity to be part of this discussion. As you said, ability grouping. Ability grouping, I think one should know the aim. Why are we doing this grouping? If the grouping is for, say, some relevant purpose, then we have to do it. Ability grouping may be like stream-wise, subject-wise, maybe the students may be doing well in one subject, not doing it in other subject. So first of all, we should have the importance and the aim of why are we grouping. According to me, ability grouping, if we are grouping the child according to their, say, ability, and especially in the pre-primary classes, then it's very difficult, first of all, to judge the ability in the beginning. And obviously, we have to put them in class 1, 2, 3, and like that. But later on, when the ability comes, then the ability grouping could be done. Though there are plus and minus on both the sides, as the other also discussed, that there are advantages of putting all the gifted children together. Gifted means all the children who are very intelligent together and the weak ones together. So there should be a smaller number for these groups. Like if we put all the gifted together, then definitely the instruction could be like that. And then we could also give them more tasks, more work, more standards. Even the instructions of the teachers could be according to them. And for the weaker ones, they could be similarly the work assignments according to their ability and one-to-one interaction, more time, more flexibility in their work according to the pace of their work. So accordingly, it should be done. Like I want to share one example that we used to do remedial teaching. Remedial teaching means all the weak ones have to be put together. Now remedial teaching, the basis was that if the child could not say read alphabets, maybe child class 3, class 4, class 5, and there might be children who could read sentence or there could be children who could read paragraph. So accordingly they were grouped. And irrespective of the class, like it may be class 3, class 4, class 5, but the grouping is according to their ability that they cannot read properly. Once they will read properly, they will be put to their own, say, sections or classes. So this way, it is a kind of flexible grouping, which already Sir has discussed. That flexible grouping has to be temporary in nature. Temporary in the sense for a temporary period, for a short period of time till the child gets the skill to do that activity and can be then put to his or her own class. So this is one, that this is the ability grouping and the advantage of it. Another advantage of this is that the child will gain the confidence. The parents will also be happy that my child is being able to do this activity very well. And also there will be, say, academic improvement, result improvement, the teacher will also be happy. But talking about the implementation part, talking about the teacher's workload, it is little difficult because in the sense that there need to be more time and more resources, more periods. Like at the end, we have the same, say, examination system, same standards where the child has to be, say, assessed. So that is the drawback. Once the standards or the assessment pattern should also change, then the flexible grouping and the ability grouping will have the wonderful results. But as it is, the way it is being there, the way it is being implemented, we need to take this into account. Another example which I want to quote is when I used to teach, say, economics to my senior classes, 12 classes, senior students, like the national income accounting, there used to be the 3 types of children. The very good children who used to solve the problem quickly. There used to be the others who used to struggle, and the other third say group, those who used to say struggle. So in this, say, heterogeneous group, the one class, but the abilities being different, there was help also. Like the intelligent one or the one who has done the question first used to help the mediocre one, and then the mediocre one used to help the, say, the weaker one also. So there was a peer learning group also, and then sharing and then gaining the confidence. So that was the benefit of, say, heterogeneous grouping. Had it been the 2 sections, one for the weak and one for the good students, it would have been difficult to say complete the syllabus, because syllabus is also vast and then the practice has to be done. So that way, the say ability grouping has its own plus and minus. That is, its good points as well as the say bad effects, but it depends upon the aim. Like when we talk about the sports, we cannot give one sport to all. Like all cannot play cricket, or all cannot be the batsman, or all cannot be the say bowlers. So there we have to group, we have to train, we have to see their potential, and then their potential is being there, and then only we master their potential. And this way, I think ability grouping is essential in many of the field, and ability grouping can be there in other areas. It has both advantages and disadvantages. So that's what I want to say.
Thank you so much, ma'am. We just wanted to explore a few of these aspects that the other two speakers spoke about. What about the drop in peer learning that happens if you're doing ability grouping? Because now you're kind of creating silos. How does the more struggling student in class learn from a more intelligent one?
See, the intelligent child can do faster. So he is being free and he has the time. He is waiting for the next question. But it depends upon the teacher to say motivate the child so that that child can help the weaker one. That's what I used to do. And then say the child who had done first, he used to get the confidence, and he used to do the second one also. Many times I had to dictate another question so as to engage him, because he is fast and he is being free. He cannot remain idle. Either he has to help or he has to do the next question. So this way, the peer learning helped, and the many of the weak children, they used to get the benefit out of it. Sometimes it's a very small thing where the child is being stuck. The child is being stuck in the formula or in the calculation or something. So this way they can ask their friends and peer groups, and it will help. So that way it is very good. And moreover, we cannot finish the syllabus. We have the two groups. We have say a lots and lots of practices and say pressure of completing syllabus within a stipulated time, and then pre-boards and then all that. So that is how it is helpful.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you so much for that. Another aspect is the one that Burrett sir spoke about, the kind of complex that you are building into a student. This is great for the good students because they are competing with a more, elite, if I may call it that, an elite group of students. But for the students who get grouped into the lower ability groups, does it not break their morale?
That's why, say grading them or say branding them that you are weak, or that's very bad. That should not be done, because then they may develop a complex, there may be negative feeling, and they might be say social relationships will also be disturbed, and they might be aggression, and sometimes they don't want to come out of that. That's also there. So it may be for a temporary period, the flexible grouping could be there, and then you can ask them to join the others, because after all, they are children, the pace may be different. Some children learn fast, some children learn slow, and again, it depends upon the subjects. If they are interested in the subject, they do so well, and if they are not interested, then that subject will be lagging behind. So this way, it can be there, but all children, they have the potential. Every child is very good, every child is being positive. So that depends on the teacher and the school and the administrator, how it works, how the implementation has to be done.
Thank you so much, ma'am. One last question, because you've headed so many schools. If you had to create a hypothetical school right now, would ability grouping be something you would recommend to that school, or you would say, no, it's better not to have?
In spite of the fact that there are a lot of number and say infrastructure problems and shortage of teachers, still I'll say flexible grouping. Like now, after the pandemic, you must be looking at the children. There might be the huge gaps. Some children may have done, some children may have not done, and some may have not been bothered. So there need to be grouping. There need to be remedial grouping, and depending upon the problems, depending upon their circumstances, one has to cater to these situations, and then they have to come up. We cannot ignore them. That actually there are students who may be having real problems. So how to tackle those problems? Who will help? The teacher will help, and addressing their problems, and then hand holding, and then giving them the solution. So that has to be done. So, but not forever. Like maybe for 2 months, 3 months, and then they have to join their classes, and then they have to be there with the other children, with other their students, so as to complete their syllabus and then go ahead. But in the beginning, I think there is no other solution. We have to cater to their needs.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think remedial grouping or flexible grouping might just be the perfect center
Yes.
line that we need to tread.
According to me, this is must. How will you bridge the gap otherwise? You cannot start from, say, chapter 2 for all if there is a person who has not even seen the chapter 1. So the chapter 1 has to be there, then only the chapter 2 will be followed. And that's what's happening in math classes. Because in the maths, students don't say do the basics, and the other teacher also, the next teacher also never bother about the basics, and they continue with the next and the next, and the previous one is being say 0. So how can you say that the child will be able to perform well? How the child will be able to solve the problem if he doesn't know the properties of triangle? How will he solve the theorem of triangle? So that is there. So first of all, the teacher has to assess, though it is very difficult, it's not easy. The teacher has to identify that what are the problems of the children, who are weak and what areas, and how to help. And they have to plan and then emphasize on the, say, worksheets accordingly, or the project work, or the hand holding, or whatever the is. Some children may not be having the resources. Like they don't have the book. They never bothered about the book, or they don't have the means to buy the book. So there also the problem is there. So therefore, all this needs to be done initially, and then only you can say go ahead. So that is my viewpoint. Anything
Wonderful,
else?
ma'am. No, ma'am. Thank you so much for answering my questions so patiently. This has been a learning experience for me, and I'm sure everybody else on this platform. Achin, I'll now request you to come and do the
Thank you
official
so
vote
much.
of thanks.
Thank you.
No, ma'am. It's our privilege.
so.
Thank you. Go for it, Achin.
I think wonderful discussion. Must appreciate. Burrett sir, thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And I think you really discussed. Thank you so much, sir, for discussing real life case scenarios. So that be it with regard to Doon school or your own experience as a student. So I think really added a lot of value. So brought life to the topic.
Thank you.
Nirmal ma'am, thank you so much for being with us here today and gracing the platform. I think, ma'am, you took a very balanced view in terms of discussing both the advantages as well as the disadvantages. And I completely agree with you that yes, implementation is the key, and case-to-case remedial grouping, which is like depending on circumstances, to ensure the students who genuinely need help, they get that help. Because I think you very rightly mentioned that we need to take them along in the journey. At Notebook, we sincerely believe that every child is equally talented, every child is equally gifted, every child has tremendous untapped potential. So I think it's all a function of engagement, whether we are being able to engage the child or we are not being able to engage the child. And if we are not being able to engage the child doesn't fail, but the entire system fails. So I think that is where, in order to ensure that a smaller group of children who may need little more help, in order to ensure that they get that kind of engagement or curiosity in the topic, that is where I guess this can really be helpful. Flexible grouping can really be helpful as a remedial measure. Thank you so much, ma'am. I also thank members of the esteemed audience for their time here today.
Thank you.
Thank
You, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Goodbye.
Thank you so much, Achin.
Thank you, Shubhai, sir.